The summer heat blazed across the Arizona desert in 1887, making the red rocks shimmer like distant water. Brothers Jake and Samuel Morrison had been riding fence lines for 3 days, checking their cattle ranch boundaries near the Mexican border. Their father had built this spread from nothing, and now at 24 and 26 years old, the brothers carried the weight of keeping it running. Jake, the younger brother, had always been the dreamer. His sandy hair caught the sunlight as he squinted toward the horizon, constantly scanning for signs of trouble. Samuel, 2 years older with darker features and serious eyes, kept the books and made the hard decisions. Their mother had died when Jake was barely 15, leaving the brothers to learn ranching the hard way under their father's stern guidance. The Morrison Ranch stretched across 5,000 acres of some of the most beautiful and dangerous land in the territory. Apache raids had been common just a few years earlier, though things had quieted down since most of the tribes had been moved to reservations. Still, both brothers carried rifles and knew how to use them. Life on the frontier demanded constant vigilance. That afternoon, as they rode through a narrow canyon checking water sources, Samuel's horse suddenly stopped and snorted nervously. The older brother raised his hand, signaling Jake to halt. Something was wrong. The desert had gone completely silent except for the sound of their horses breathing heavily in the heat. Jake dismounted quietly and crept forward, his boots making soft sounds on the rocky ground. Behind a large boulder near the canyon wall, he discovered something that made his heart race. A small figure lay motionless in the shade, barely breathing. It was a young Apache girl, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, wearing traditional buckskin clothing that had been torn and stained with blood. Samuel joined his brother, kneeling beside the unconscious child. Her long black hair was matted with dirt and dried blood from a wound on her forehead. Her lips were cracked from dehydration, and her small body showed signs of exhaustion and hunger. It was clear she had been running for days, probably fleeing from something terrible. The brothers exchanged glances, both understanding the gravity of the situation. Taking in an Apache child could bring trouble from both sides. Many white settlers still viewed all Native Americans with suspicion and fear, while Apache warriors might see any involvement with their people as kidnapping or worse. Yet neither brother could leave a dying child in the desert. Jake gently lifted the girl while Samuel gathered water from their canteens. They managed to get a few drops between her lips, and she stirred slightly, murmuring words in Apache that neither brother understood. Her dark eyes opened briefly, filled with terror, before she lost consciousness again. The ride back to their ranch took 2 hours, with Jake holding the girl carefully in his arms while his horse moved at a gentle pace. Samuel rode ahead to prepare their small ranch house and gather medical supplies. The brothers had learned basic doctoring from necessity, as the nearest town was a full day's ride away. Their ranch house was simple but sturdy, built from adobe bricks with a wooden porch that faced the mountains. Inside, Samuel had prepared their mother's old bedroom, spreading clean blankets on the bed and heating water for cleaning wounds. The brothers worked together in silence, carefully washing the blood from the girl's injuries and applying bandages made from torn cloth. The head wound appeared to be from a fall rather than a weapon, though several scrapes and cuts suggested she had been running through rough terrain. Her feet were badly blistered and cut from traveling without proper protection. Most concerning was her severe dehydration and the fever that was beginning to set in. For 3 days, the brothers took turns caring for their unexpected patient. Jake proved surprisingly gentle, spooning small amounts of broth into her mouth and keeping cool cloths on her forehead to fight the fever. Samuel researched Apache customs in his father's old books, trying to understand what they might be dealing with. On the 4th morning, the girl's eyes opened and stayed open. She looked around the unfamiliar room with the wariness of a wild animal, her gaze finally settling on Jake, who sat in a chair beside the bed reading. When she saw him, she tried to sit up quickly, but fell back with a gasp of pain. Jake spoke softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. The girl watched him carefully, her intelligent dark eyes taking in every detail of his appearance and the room around her. She was clearly trying to determine if she was safe or in new danger. Samuel entered with a bowl of warm soup and some bread, moving slowly to avoid startling their patient. The girl's eyes followed his every movement, and when he placed the food on a small table beside the bed, She looked at it hungrily, but made no move to eat. The brothers realized she was waiting to see if the food was poisoned or if this was some kind of trap. Jake picked up the spoon, tasted the soup himself, then set it down and backed away from the bed. After several minutes, the girl reached for the bowl with shaking hands and began to eat slowly. Over the following days, a careful routine developed. The girl, who they learned was named Ayanna, gradually began to trust her rescuers. She spoke no English initially, but was clearly intelligent and began picking up basic words quickly. The brothers learned that her village had been attacked by Mexican raiders who were capturing Apache children to sell as slaves. Ayanna had escaped during the chaos, running north toward the mountains she knew from childhood stories. She had been traveling alone for nearly a week when dehydration and exhaustion finally overcame her in the canyon where the brothers found her. Her family was dead or scattered, and she had nowhere to go. The brothers faced a difficult decision. They could try to find other Apache people who might take her in, but the nearest reservation was hundreds of miles away through dangerous territory. They could take her to the territorial authorities, but that would likely mean an orphanage or worse. Or they could keep her with them, knowing it would complicate their lives in countless ways. As they watched Ayanna slowly regain her strength, laughing softly at Jake's clumsy attempts to braid her hair or helping Samuel tend their small vegetable garden, the decision seemed to make itself. This child had been through enough trauma. If she wanted to stay with them, they would find a way to make it work. The Morrison brothers had never expected to become guardians to an Apache girl, but fate had placed her in their path. Neither man could have imagined how completely this decision would change all their lives, or how the frightened child they rescued would one day return as a woman, to change their hearts forever. 3 months had passed since Ayanna's arrival at the Morrison Ranch, and life had settled into a new rhythm that surprised everyone. The young Apache girl had proven to be remarkably adaptable, learning English with impressive speed while teaching the brothers basic Apache words and customs in return. Her presence had brought an unexpected warmth to the bachelor household. Jake found himself looking forward to her bright chatter during morning chores. Ayanna had appointed herself his shadow, following him as he fed the chickens and milked their 2 cows. She showed natural skill with animals, calming nervous horses with gentle touches and somehow convincing their temperamental rooster to stop attacking visitors. Her laughter had become a welcome sound in the quiet desert mornings. Samuel discovered that Ayanna had an excellent memory and quick mind for numbers. She began helping him with ranch bookkeeping, quickly understanding the relationship between cattle prices and feed costs. Her questions were always thoughtful, showing an intelligence that impressed both brothers. She also proved invaluable in spotting potential problems, her keen eyes catching details they might miss. The brothers had decided to tell neighbors that Ayanna was the orphaned daughter of a Mexican ranch hand who had worked for their father years earlier. This story explained her appearance and provided social cover in a community that still harbored suspicions about Native Americans. Most folks accepted the explanation without question, especially after seeing how well-mannered and helpful the girl was. However, not everyone welcomed Ayanna's presence. Harvey Mullins, who owned the neighboring spread, made his disapproval clear during a chance meeting at the general store in town. Mullins was a harsh man who had lost family members in Apache raids years earlier. His hatred for all Native Americans ran deep and bitter. Samuel noticed Mullins watching Ayanna with suspicious eyes as she helped load supplies into their wagon. The older rancher's face showed clear disgust, and he made pointed comments about people who couldn't tell the difference between civilized folks and savages. Jake's jaw tightened, but Samuel placed a warning hand on his brother's arm. The brothers knew they had to be careful. If word spread about Ayanna's true heritage, it could mean serious trouble for all of them. Some people in the territory still believed that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. They would have to protect her not just from physical dangers, but from the prejudice and hatred that infected too many hearts. Meanwhile, Ayanna was struggling with her own conflicts. She loved the kindness and safety the Morrison brothers provided, but she also felt guilty about abandoning her Apache identity. At night, she would whisper prayers in her native language and wonder if she was betraying her dead family by learning white customs and wearing white clothes. The girl often stood on the ranch house porch at sunset, looking toward the distant mountains where her people had lived for generations. The brothers noticed these quiet moments and understood she was grieving not just her lost family, but her entire way of life. They tried to honor her heritage by encouraging her to share Apache stories and traditions. One evening, as autumn approached, trouble arrived in the form of 3 strangers riding up to the ranch house. The men wore dusty clothes and had the hard look of bounty hunters or worse. Their leader, a scarred man named Collins, claimed to be tracking a young Apache girl who had escaped from Mexican slavers months earlier. Collins explained that the Mexican authorities had put a reward on the girl's return, claiming she was valuable property that had been stolen from them. He described Ayanna perfectly, down to a small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. The brothers felt their blood run cold as they realized these men intended to drag Ayanna back to slavery or death. Samuel stepped forward calmly, telling the men they had seen no Apache children and suggesting they try the reservation to the north. Jake stood slightly behind his brother, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Both brothers knew they were probably outgunned, but neither would allow these men to take Ayanna. The bounty hunters were suspicious, but had no proof. They searched the barn and outbuildings while Ayanna hid in a root cellar beneath the kitchen floor, hardly daring to breathe. The men found nothing and eventually rode away, but not before Collins warned that they would be watching the ranch and would return if they found any evidence of the girl. That night, the brothers sat with Ayanna and explained the danger they all now faced. The girl listened quietly, her young face serious and thoughtful. She told them she would leave in the morning, traveling north to find her own people rather than bring danger to those who had saved her life. Both brothers protested immediately. Jake knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in his larger ones. He told her that she was family now, that families protected each other no matter what. Samuel nodded agreement, saying they would find a way to keep her safe, but she was not leaving. The next few weeks were tense as they watched for signs that the bounty hunters had returned. The brothers took turns staying close to the house, and they taught Ayanna hiding places throughout the ranch buildings. They also began making plans to send her further north to friends who owned a ranch in Colorado Territory, where she might be safer. But Ayanna had other ideas. One morning, she approached Samuel with a carefully thought-out plan. She suggested that instead of running, they should make her disappearance seem official and permanent. If people believed she was dead, no one would keep looking for her. Her plan was clever but dangerous. They would stage a riding accident near the river, leaving evidence that she had fallen in and been swept away by the current. Her clothes would be found torn on river rocks, and the brothers would sadly report the tragic loss of their ward. Meanwhile, she would hide at an abandoned line shack in the mountains until spring. The brothers were reluctant to put her in such danger, but Ayanna argued persuasively that it was better than running forever or putting them at risk. She was Apache, she reminded them. Her people knew how to survive in harsh conditions that would kill others. She could handle a winter in the mountains if it meant safety for all of them. After much discussion, they agreed to try her plan. The fake drowning was staged convincingly, with Jake discovering her torn dress caught on rocks while Samuel rode for help. The whole community mourned the loss of the sweet Mexican girl who had brightened the Morrison Ranch for such a short time. Harvey Mullins was among the few who seemed pleased by the news, making crude comments about how it saved everyone the trouble of dealing with a half-breed later. His callousness disgusted most folks, but his suspicions died with the apparent confirmation of Ayanna's death. For the next 6 months, the brothers secretly supplied the mountain line shack with food and necessities, taking turns on weekly trips to check on their hidden ward. Ayanna not only survived the winter, but seemed to thrive in the wilderness, reconnecting with skills her grandmother had taught her years earlier. When spring arrived, they faced a new decision. Ayanna could continue living secretly, but she was growing into a young woman who needed education and social contact. The brothers began planning a more permanent solution, one that would allow her to live openly while protecting her true identity. None of them could have predicted how much they had all changed during those months of separation, or how the bonds between them had grown even stronger through the shared danger and sacrifice. Spring of 1889 brought new challenges and opportunities to the Morrison Ranch. After months of careful planning, the brothers had developed a strategy to bring Ayanna back into society, under a completely new identity. Their solution came through an unexpected friendship with Father Miguel Santos, a progressive Catholic priest who ministered to both Mexican and Apache communities along the border. Father Santos had visited the ranch several times during Ayana's supposed death, offering comfort to the grieving brothers. Samuel had eventually confided the truth to the priest, who proved to be a valuable ally rather than a threat. The priest understood the complexities of frontier life and had helped other mixed-heritage children navigate the dangerous social waters of territorial Arizona. Together, they created a new backstory for Ayana. She would return as Maria Santos, the priest's orphaned niece from a small village in Sonora, Mexico. Father Santos had genuine documents from his family in Mexico, and Ayana's natural intelligence and months of practice had perfected her Spanish language skills. Her Apache features could easily pass for Mexican heritage, and her education with the brothers gave her the social graces expected of a rancher's ward. The transformation was remarkable. When Ayana returned to the Morrison Ranch as Maria Santos in late spring, even close neighbors barely recognized the confident young woman who had emerged from the frightened child of 2 years earlier. She was now 13, taller and more mature, with an elegant bearing that came from successfully surviving on her own in the wilderness. Jake found himself strangely nervous around this new version of the girl he had helped raise. Maria carried herself with quiet dignity, her dark eyes holding secrets and strength that made her seem older than her years. She moved with the silent grace of her Apache heritage but spoke perfect English and Spanish, seamlessly blending cultures in a way that impressed everyone she met. Samuel noticed the change in his younger brother's behavior around Maria. Jake had always been protective of Ayana, but now he seemed almost shy, stumbling over words and blushing when she complimented his work around the ranch. The older brother found this development both amusing and concerning, knowing that Jake was developing feelings that could complicate their carefully constructed new life. Maria herself seemed unaware of the effect she was having on Jake. She threw herself enthusiastically into ranch life, learning skills that proper ladies of the time rarely mastered. She could rope and brand cattle, break horses with patience and skill, and had an intuitive understanding of land management that impressed neighboring ranchers who met her. The local community welcomed Father Santos's niece warmly, especially after she demonstrated her usefulness during a difficult calving season. Maria worked alongside the brothers for 3 days straight, helping deliver difficult births and saving several valuable animals. Her combination of Apache healing knowledge and practical experience made her invaluable during the crisis. However, their peaceful existence was threatened when Harvey Mullins began expressing suspicious interest in the new arrival. The bitter rancher had developed an obsession with proving that his neighbors were harboring secrets, and Maria's appearance so soon after Ayana's supposed death seemed too convenient for his paranoid mind. Mullins began asking pointed questions around town about Father Santos's family in Mexico, trying to verify Maria's story through his own contacts south of the border. He also made excuses to visit the Morrison Ranch more frequently, studying Maria's features and mannerisms with unsettling intensity. The situation came to a head during the annual 4th of July celebration in town. The entire community gathered for horse races, contests, and dancing, with families from ranches across the territory joining in the festivities. Maria had been looking forward to her first public social event, wearing a beautiful blue dress that Samuel had ordered from San Francisco. At the dance that evening, Maria attracted considerable attention from young men in the area. Her exotic beauty and confident manner made her the center of attention, much to Jake's obvious discomfort. Samuel watched his brother's jealousy with growing concern, recognizing that Jake's feelings had developed into something deeper and more dangerous than protective affection. The crisis erupted when Harvey Mullins, drunk on whiskey and resentment, confronted Maria publicly in the middle of the dance floor. He grabbed her wrist roughly and announced to the shocked crowd that she was not who she claimed to be. In his slurred speech, he accused her of being the Apache girl who had supposedly drowned 2 years earlier. The accusation sent shocked whispers through the crowd. Several men stepped forward to defend Maria, but the damage was done. Mullins's words had planted seeds of doubt that would grow regardless of any denials. Father Santos immediately stepped in, speaking angrily in Spanish and calling Mullins a drunken fool, but the priest's defense only seemed to fuel more suspicion. Jake's reaction was swift and violent. He knocked Mullins down with a single punch, then stood over the fallen man, threatening to kill him if he ever touched Maria again. Samuel had to physically restrain his brother, while the crowd looked on in stunned silence. The evening ended with the Morrison party leaving early under a cloud of whispered speculation. The ride home was tense and silent. Maria sat between the brothers in their wagon, her earlier joy completely destroyed by Mullins's accusations. She understood that her presence was now a liability that could destroy the brothers' reputation and livelihood. The careful facade they had built was cracking under the pressure of community suspicion. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere around the ranch became increasingly strained. Some neighbors continued to treat Maria normally, but others were more distant and watchful. Business relationships that Samuel had spent years building began to suffer as questions about Maria's identity spread. Throughout the territory, Maria made the difficult decision that she could no longer stay at the ranch. Late one evening, she told the brothers that she planned to leave for California, where she could start completely fresh with no connections to her past. She had saved money from helping with ranch work and felt confident she could make her own way in the world. Both brothers protested vehemently. Samuel argued that running away would only confirm people's suspicions, while Jake became emotional, telling Maria that he couldn't bear to lose her again. The conversation revealed the depth of Jake's feelings, as he struggled to explain that she had become essential to his happiness and sense of purpose. Maria listened to both brothers with growing understanding of how complicated the situation had become. She realized that Jake's feelings for her had evolved from brotherly protection into romantic love, while Samuel was torn between protecting his brother and doing what seemed best for everyone's safety. The young woman made a decision that surprised both men. Instead of leaving immediately, she asked for time to think about all their options. She suggested that they needed to find a solution that would protect everyone, while allowing her to stay in the only home she had known since childhood. As autumn approached, Maria spent long hours walking the ranch property, thinking about her future and the two men who had saved her life. She was no longer the frightened child they had rescued, but a young woman capable of making her own choices about love and loyalty. The brothers watched her during these solitary walks, both understanding that a decision was coming that would change all their lives forever. Neither could predict what choice she would make, but both knew that their simple bachelor existence was about to end, one way or another. The stage was set for a resolution that would test the bonds of loyalty, love, and family that had been forged through years of shared danger and devotion. The autumn of 1890 brought both resolution and new complications to the Morrison ranch. Maria had been thinking deeply about her future and the complex emotions swirling around the three people who had become her family. At 15, she possessed the wisdom of someone who had survived more hardship than most adults would ever face. During one of her evening walks, Maria encountered an elderly Apache woman named Grandmother Willow, who had been quietly watching the ranch from the nearby hills. The old woman approached carefully, speaking in the Apache language that Maria had almost forgotten during her years of hiding. The conversation that followed would prove to be life-changing for everyone involved. Grandmother Willow had been searching for survivors from Maria's original village for 3 years. She was one of the few elders who had escaped the Mexican slave raiders and had been living with a small band of Apache refugees in the remote mountains. The old woman had heard whispers about a young Apache girl living with white ranchers and had come to investigate. Maria learned that several members of her birth family had actually survived the raid, including 2 cousins and an uncle who now lived on a reservation in New Mexico. The knowledge that she still had blood relatives alive filled Maria with conflicting emotions. Part of her yearned to reconnect with her Apache heritage, while another part recognized that the Morrison brothers had become her true family through love and sacrifice. Grandmother Willow spent several days secretly camped near the ranch, observing the interactions between Maria and the brothers. What she saw surprised her. Instead of the typical relationship between white masters and an Indian captive, she witnessed genuine love and respect flowing in all directions. The old woman recognized that Maria had found something rare and precious. The Apache elder also noticed Jake's obvious romantic feelings for Maria and Samuel's protective concern for both his brother and their ward. Her experienced eyes saw the brewing conflict that threatened to tear apart this unusual family. Before leaving, Grandmother Willow shared some crucial Apache wisdom about love, loyalty, and the strength that could come from embracing rather than fighting one's true nature. Maria returned to the ranch house that evening with new clarity about her situation. She called both brothers to the kitchen table and announced that she had something important to tell them. The revelation that she had Apache relatives still alive shocked both men, who had assumed she was completely alone in the world. The news created an immediate crisis. Samuel's practical mind immediately began calculating the implications of Maria having family connections that could be traced back to her. If authorities discovered these relatives, it could unravel their entire deception and bring serious legal consequences for harboring a runaway. Jake's reaction was more emotional. The possibility that Maria might leave to reunite with her blood family terrified him. He had been struggling with his growing romantic feelings for months, knowing that expressing them could destroy their family dynamic, but unable to stop his heart from wanting something that seemed impossible. Maria listened to both brothers' concerns with patience, then surprised them by announcing her decision. She had no intention of leaving the Morrison Ranch or the men who had saved and raised her. This was her home, and they were her family. However, she also had something else to tell them that would require courage. From all three of them, she had realized that the traditional path of eventually marrying someone from town and leaving the ranch would break her heart and separate her from the only family she had ever truly known. She also understood that Jake's feelings for her were reciprocated, though she had been careful not to encourage them while their situation remained so precarious. Maria's solution was unprecedented and would require them to think beyond conventional social norms. She proposed that when she came of age, she would marry both brothers in the Apache tradition, which recognized that love could take many forms and that strong families sometimes required unconventional arrangements to survive and thrive. The suggestion left both brothers speechless. In white society, such an arrangement would be considered scandalous and illegal. However, Maria argued that they were already living outside normal social boundaries by necessity. If they were going to build their own version of family, why not make it one that honored both love and loyalty without forcing anyone to choose between them? Samuel was the first to recover from his shock. His logical mind immediately began analyzing the practical implications of such an arrangement. While polygamy was illegal under territorial law, many frontier families lived by their own rules when necessity demanded it. If they were careful and discreet, it might be possible to create a life that satisfied everyone's needs. Jake's response was more conflicted. His romantic feelings for Maria were strong and growing stronger, but the idea of sharing her with his brother, even a brother he loved and trusted completely, challenged everything he had been taught about love and marriage. He needed time to think about whether he could accept such an unconventional arrangement. Over the following weeks, the three of them engaged in careful conversations about what such a life might look like. Maria proved to be the most mature and thoughtful about the practical aspects. She pointed out that she already shared household responsibilities and emotional bonds with both men. The main change would be the addition of romantic love to relationships built on mutual respect and genuine caring. The brothers gradually began to see the wisdom in Maria's proposal. They had always been unusually close, working together seamlessly and trusting each other completely. If they could share the responsibilities of running a ranch, why couldn't they share the joys and challenges of marriage to a woman they both loved, albeit in different ways? Samuel's feelings for Maria were more protective and paternal, though he admitted to finding her attractive and intelligent. He could envision a marriage based on partnership and companionship, rather than passionate romance. Jake's feelings were more intensely romantic, but he also valued the deep friendship and trust he shared with his brother. The arrangement would also solve several practical problems that had been worrying all of them. Maria would have the security of two husbands to protect and provide for her in a dangerous frontier environment. The brothers would have companionship and the possibility of children without having to bring outsiders into their carefully guarded secrets about Maria's true identity. As winter approached, they began making concrete plans for their unconventional future. Father Santos, after recovering from his initial shock, agreed to perform a private Catholic ceremony for Maria and Samuel, while an Apache elder that Grandmother Willow had introduced them to would conduct a traditional ceremony binding Maria to Jake. The legal complications would be managed by having only one official marriage recorded in territorial records, while treating the second ceremony as a spiritual and emotional commitment that would be honored within their family unit. Many frontier families operated under similar informal arrangements out of necessity or choice. Their decision required them to become even more isolated from conventional society, but all three had already accepted that their unusual circumstances demanded an unusual solution. They were creating something new and different, a family structure that honored both love and loyalty, while providing security and happiness for everyone involved. As 1890 drew to a close, the Morrison Ranch was quietly preparing for ceremonies that would bind three people together in love, creating a family that defied convention but satisfied the hearts and souls of everyone involved. The frightened Apache child who had been rescued 3 years earlier was about to become the wife of the two men who had given her life, safety, and love when she had nothing left in the world. The foundation was being laid for a marriage that would endure through decades of challenges and changes, proving that love could indeed take many forms when it was built on mutual respect, genuine caring, and the courage to follow one's heart rather than society's expectations. The spring of 1891 arrived with a sense of anticipation and nervous energy at the Morrison Ranch. Maria had turned 16 in February, and the three of them had spent the winter months finalizing their plans for the unprecedented marriage arrangement that would bind them together as a family. The ceremonies were planned for late May, when the desert flowers would be blooming and the weather would be perfect for the outdoor Apache ritual. Father Santos had initially struggled with the moral implications of their plan, but eventually came to understand that their situation required solutions that went beyond conventional church doctrine. He agreed to perform a private Catholic ceremony uniting Maria and Samuel, recognizing that their relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than passionate romance, but was no less valid for that difference. The Apache ceremony would be conducted by an elderly shaman named Standing Bear, who had been convinced by Grandmother Willow that the Morrison family deserved recognition and blessing for their unusual but loving arrangement. Standing Bear had spent time observing the three of them together, and concluded that their bond was stronger than many traditional marriages he had witnessed. However, their careful plans were nearly derailed by an unexpected visitor in early April. A territorial marshal named William Hayes arrived at the ranch with papers, authorizing him to investigate reports of illegal activity in the area. Harvey Mullins had continued his campaign of suspicion and had finally convinced someone in authority to take his accusations seriously. Marshal Hayes was a fair-minded man who had seen enough frontier justice to know that situations were often more complex than they appeared on paper. He interviewed the three of them separately, looking for inconsistencies in their stories about Maria's identity and background. Fortunately, their years of practice had made their deception nearly perfect. Maria impressed the marshal with her composure and intelligence, answering his questions in fluent Spanish and providing detailed stories about her supposed childhood in Mexico. Father Santos arrived during the investigation and provided passionate testimony about his beloved niece, even producing letters from his family in Sonora that corroborated her identity. The marshal found no evidence to support Mullins's accusations and was clearly disgusted by the man's obvious prejudice and spite. However, he warned the Morrison family that they should be prepared for continued scrutiny from certain members of the community who seemed determined to cause trouble for them. After Marshal Hayes left, the three of them realized that their marriage would actually provide additional protection for Maria's assumed identity. As the legal wife of a respected rancher, she would have social status that would make it harder for people like Mullins to attack her credibility or question her right to live in the territory. The preparations for their dual wedding ceremonies became a source of joy and excitement that helped offset the stress of the investigation. Maria worked with Grandmother Willow to create traditional Apache wedding garments, learning beadwork and other skills that connected her to her heritage while preparing for her future as a frontier wife. The brothers made improvements to their ranch house, adding a larger bedroom and expanding the kitchen to accommodate their growing family. Jake built Maria a beautiful hope chest from local pine wood, carving Apache symbols along the sides that represented protection, fertility, and eternal love. Samuel contributed by ordering fine fabrics and household goods from San Francisco, wanting Maria to have luxuries that reflected her importance to their family. As the wedding date approached, both brothers experienced moments of doubt and nervousness about their unconventional arrangement. Jake worried that sharing Maria's love would diminish his own happiness, while Samuel questioned whether he was truly ready for the responsibilities of marriage. Even in their unusual circumstances, Maria proved to be the steadying influence that kept them all focused on their commitment to each other. She reminded them that love was not diminished by being shared, but rather grew stronger when it included more people who genuinely cared for each other's well-being and happiness. Her wisdom and maturity continued to surprise both men, who sometimes forgot how much she had grown since the frightened child they had rescued. The Catholic ceremony took place on a beautiful May morning in Father Santos's small chapel. With only Grandmother Willow and Standing Bear as witnesses, Maria wore a simple white dress that Samuel had ordered from San Francisco, and she carried wildflowers picked from the ranch property. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with vows that emphasized partnership, respect, and mutual support. Samuel surprised everyone, including himself, with the emotion he felt during the ceremony. What had begun as a practical arrangement had evolved into genuine affection and commitment. He found himself truly looking forward to sharing his life with this remarkable young woman who had brought so much joy and purpose to their previously solitary existence. That evening, the Apache ceremony took place in a secluded canyon on the ranch property, illuminated by torchlight and blessed by the presence of several Apache elders who had quietly arrived to witness this unprecedented union. Maria wore traditional buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork that told the story of her survival and rebirth among the white brothers, who had become her salvation. Jake was visibly moved by the ancient rituals that bound him to Maria, according to the traditions of her birth people. The ceremony included elements that honored both her Apache heritage and her adopted life with the Morrison family. Standing Bear spoke eloquently about the strength that comes from embracing love in all its forms and the courage required to build new traditions when old ones no longer served. The celebration that followed included traditional Apache foods and dancing that lasted well into the night. Even Samuel, typically reserved and serious, found himself laughing and dancing with an abandon that his new wife and brother had rarely seen. The joy and sense of rightness that filled the canyon that night convinced everyone present that they had witnessed something sacred and beautiful. Over the following months, the unusual marriage arrangement proved to work better than any of them had dared hope. Maria divided her time and attention between both husbands with natural grace, creating separate but connected relationships that satisfied everyone's emotional and physical needs. The brothers discovered that jealousy was less of a problem than they had feared, as long as communication remained open and honest. The ranch prospered under their shared management, with Maria's Apache knowledge of the land complementing the brothers' ranching expertise. She introduced water conservation techniques and natural pest control methods that increased their crop yields and improved their cattle's health. Her ability to read weather patterns and understand animal behavior made her an invaluable partner in all aspects of ranch operations. By autumn, Maria announced that she was expecting her first child. The pregnancy brought new joy and anticipation to their household, though it also raised questions about which brother might be the father. All three agreed that it didn't matter. The child would be loved and raised by the entire family regardless of biological parentage. The pregnancy proceeded smoothly, with both brothers taking turns caring for Maria and preparing for the arrival of their child. Grandmother Willow moved temporarily to the ranch to assist with the birth, bringing traditional Apache remedies and wisdom that supplemented the basic medical knowledge the brothers possessed. As winter settled over the ranch, the three of them spent quiet evenings by the fireplace, planning for their expanding family and reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them together. Maria would often rest her hand on her growing belly while listening to Jake read aloud from books Samuel ordered from back east, or while Samuel played his fiddle in the soft lamplight. Their unconventional family had found a rhythm and happiness that none of them had thought possible during those first uncertain days when they rescued a dying Apache child from the desert. The foundation was solid, built on genuine love, mutual respect, and the courage to create their own definition of family in a harsh but beautiful frontier landscape. As 1891 drew to a close, the Morrison Ranch had become home to something remarkable, a marriage that defied convention but embodied the best qualities of love, loyalty, and commitment. The frightened child who had been rescued 4 years earlier was now a confident woman, wife, and expectant mother who had found her place in the world by choosing to build it herself with the two men who had given her everything when she had nothing left to lose. The winter of 1892 brought both new life and unexpected challenges to the Morrison Ranch. Maria gave birth to a healthy daughter in February, with grandmother Willow assisting the delivery using traditional Apache methods combined with modern precautions. The baby girl had dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her days, and all three parents fell instantly in love with little Sarah, named after Samuel and Jake's deceased mother. The question of paternity became irrelevant the moment both brothers held their daughter for the first time. Jake wept openly as he cradled the tiny infant, while Samuel's normally composed demeanor cracked with pure joy and wonder. Maria watched her two husbands bond with their child and knew that their unusual family arrangement had created something beautiful and strong that could weather any storm. However, their peaceful domestic happiness was threatened by events beyond their control. The territorial government was cracking down on polygamous relationships as part of statehood preparations, and Harvey Mullins had continued his campaign of harassment with renewed vigor. He had somehow learned about their marriage ceremonies and was threatening to bring federal marshals to investigate what he claimed was illegal polygamy and harboring of fugitive Indians. The family held urgent discussions about their options as spring arrived. They could flee to Mexico or California, where their past might not follow them, but that would mean abandoning the ranch that had become their life's work. They could try to maintain their current arrangement in secret, but the risks were increasing as territorial oversight tightened. Maria surprised both brothers by proposing a different solution entirely. She suggested that they should get ahead of any investigation by having their marriage arrangement legally recognized through a little-known provision in territorial law that allowed for common law arrangements in remote areas where conventional legal procedures were impractical. Working with Father Santos and a sympathetic lawyer in Tucson, they discovered that Maria's marriage to Samuel could be legally maintained while her relationship with Jake could be formalized as a domestic partnership that gave him parental rights to any children and inheritance rights to ranch property. It wasn't perfect, but it provided legal protection that would be difficult for their enemies to challenge. The legal maneuvering took several months to complete, during which time the family lived under the constant threat of investigation and arrest. Baby Sarah provided a constant source of joy during these stressful months, her innocent laughter and bright curiosity reminding all three adults what they were fighting to protect. By summer, their legal situation had stabilized enough for them to breathe easier, but they remained vigilant about maintaining their careful public facade. Maria continued to be known publicly as Samuel's wife, while Jake was officially considered the ranch foreman and business partner. Their private family arrangements remained exactly as they had been, but now had the protection of legal documentation. The summer of 1892 also brought unexpected validation when a prominent ranchers' association invited Samuel to speak at their annual conference about innovative cattle management techniques. Maria's Apache knowledge had helped them develop methods that were producing exceptional results, and word had spread throughout the territory about the Morrison Ranch's success. Samuel's presentation was well received, and several other ranchers asked to visit their property to learn more about their techniques. These visits helped establish the Morrison family as respected members of the ranching community, making it harder for people like Mullins to attack their reputation with baseless accusations. Maria proved to be an excellent hostess during these visits, impressing guests with her intelligence, grace, and deep understanding of livestock and land management. Many visitors commented on how fortunate Samuel was to have married such a remarkable woman, never suspecting the unconventional nature of their family arrangement. As autumn arrived, Maria announced that she was expecting her second child. This pregnancy brought even more joy than the first, as they now knew what to expect and felt more secure in their legal and social position. Both brothers had proven to be devoted fathers to Sarah, sharing childcare duties with natural ease and creating a warm, loving environment for their growing family. The second child, a son they named Daniel after Jake's middle name, was born in early 1893. Like his sister, he was healthy and beautiful, with features that could have come from either brother. The question of biological paternity continued to be irrelevant to all three parents, who were more interested in creating a loving family than determining genetics. Harvey Mullins made one final attempt to cause trouble for the Morrison family in late 1893, hiring a private investigator to dig into Maria's background and their marriage arrangements. However, their legal preparations proved effective, and the investigator found nothing that could be used against them. Father Santos's documentation of Maria's Mexican identity was thorough and convincing, and their marriage records were all properly filed and legal. The investigator's report actually worked in their favor, as it officially cleared them of any wrongdoing and made Mullins look like a vindictive troublemaker. The territorial authorities warned Mullins to stop harassing his neighbors or face legal consequences himself. Defeated and discredited, he eventually sold his ranch and moved away, ending the longest-running threat to their family's security. By 1894, the Morrison Ranch had become one of the most successful and respected properties in the territory. Their innovative ranching methods were being copied throughout the Southwest, and their family had grown to include 3 children with another on the way. Maria had proven herself to be an exceptional mother, raising children who were confident, intelligent, and deeply loved by all 3 of their parents. The unusual marriage arrangement that had seemed so risky and unconventional 7 years earlier had evolved into something beautiful and enduring. All 3 adults had found happiness and fulfillment that none of them could have achieved alone. Their love had grown stronger through shared challenges and triumphs, creating bonds that would last a lifetime. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Morrison family looked toward the future with confidence and joy. The frightened Apache child who had been rescued from certain death had grown into a strong, loving woman who had created her own definition of family and happiness. The 2 bachelor brothers who had never expected to marry had found love and purpose beyond their wildest dreams. Their story became a quiet legend in the territory, not because people knew the full truth about their arrangement, but because everyone could see the obvious love, respect, and happiness that characterized their family life. They had proven that love could indeed take many forms, and that courage and commitment could overcome even the most challenging circumstances when people were willing to follow their hearts and create their own path to happiness. The Morrison Ranch would continue to thrive for generations, with children and grandchildren who grew up understanding that family was defined by love and loyalty, rather than conventional expectations. The legacy of Maria, Samuel, and Jake's unconventional marriage would endure as a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create something beautiful from the most unlikely circumstances.